read out a couple of them, let the candidates say a few words, and then if there are any supplementaries from the audience, we will see if we can help Mr. Burnham. So, the first question I had is, do any of the candidates think that the UK should pay any money at all to the European Union in order to leave the institution? Another one is, since the referendum, we have been given some better idea of the way all our institutions have been integrated over the last 40 years of cooperation. Trade is not the major concern. How should we be negotiating so as not to destroy our economy and culture? And another one, bearing in mind the crucial nature of the work undertaken by so many of our European and international workers, what plans do you have for ensuring that social care, NHS and other organisations will continue to flourish as we move towards the exit? Andy, perhaps you'd start us off, please.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, we, that's the Labour Party, would allow all the European workers who are here now to stay. And I think the Tory attempt at bringing down immigration numbers is a joke. Talking to farmers earlier today, their main concern was about actually having people to employ during the time when they need to be picking crops. So we need to have a situation in place where farmers and others can access workers. The NHS, we know, would completely fall apart if you took foreign workers out. And I'm told by people on the streets and on the doorsteps who inform me that the British worker will step up to do these sorts of jobs. Well, they haven't stepped up since about the early 60s, so I can't see they're going to be stepping up very much now. We have signed up to a whole range of treaties within Europe that we will have to follow through. We have responsibilities, not only European, but global, around refugees, for example, that we have responsibilities as a country, and we have to fulfil those responsibilities. And it is not good enough to put up somebody who's supposed to be, strong and stable, but actually not very able to lead us in exiting Europe. The Labour Party has 600,000 members. It is the biggest political party in Europe. We're an international socialist movement, and we, the Labour Party, are best placed to do any exiting from Europe. And what we will make sure is that the deals that we get are the best possible deals, and that workers' rights are totally at the top of that process. Because part of what we'll also be doing is banning zero-hour contracts when those are forced zero-hour contracts, and of course we will be raising the minimum wage to £10 an hour. So people will actually be properly rewarded for work that they do. That is an essential part. And the income inequality that we know about, the income inequality which is causing a rift actually in this country, that we know that if you have and you live in a country with a huge gap between the richest and the poorest, as we do in this country, all of the other indicators like trust that people have, like mental illness, like scores of education, language, that all of those scores are much, much worse. And it's strange, isn't it, that in this country our education is failing, our NHS is cracking and falling apart, or is going to be sold off and privatised, that is the situation that we're going to find ourselves over the next few years. And therefore it is actually only a Labour Party who can lead us out. I didn't want to leave Europe. I was a very, very staunch Remainer. Why would you vote to be part of something smaller?
Lorna.
Was that any better? Wow. I didn't think Jeremy Corbyn was actually wanting to really, really leave Europe. But I have to say that I believed we should never have joined Europe in the 1980s, which is why
There was a referendum and we all agreed to it. In 1975 or whenever it was.
Lorna.
continue. We are a unique nation, and when
We're a nation of immigrants. Every single person in this country has come from somewhere else originally. Why does that make us so unique? We're unique because of the values we now hold.
we traded with virtually the whole world in our past history, and we were able to do that. Why do you think that we cannot do it now? We are a creative nation. We have our universities have the best research in the world. We have the abilities to stand on our own feet and get on with trading again. Why should we pay money to leave the EU? Absolutely not. I think I think they will really miss us when we leave, and I do wonder whether they will actually allow us to leave on good terms, because other countries will be encouraged to. We will set a benchmark of what it is to leave, and other countries won't be allowed to do that. The EU wouldn't want it. So we really need to have people who are passionate about leaving the EU, not Europe, because we trade with Europe as well, but it is the EU that is a dictatorship. We are told what to do. When in our last history did we accept a dictatorship? We did not accept Hitler. I think it was William the Conqueror.
You can hardly equate Hitler with the European Union.
Well.
Well, if you are going to, let's hear it.
Oh, it's not a democratic institution.
Tessa.
Right, so the first thing I'd say is that we, as a nation, we voted to go out, and that's exactly where we're going. Now, having said that, there are a number of things I think that we need to be very wary of. There is clearly the next 5 years is going to be governed by how we proceed through the Brexit negotiations, and I don't believe, I think James will tell you, you absolutely need to vote for Theresa May. Of course you won't be voting for James, and what I would say to you is actually, you need somebody who's going to be brave enough to stand up to their party leader or stand up to whatever's needed to make sure that the questions are asked on behalf of people who live here in Somerset. And the things that matter to you, we need to iron those things out. What I would say is I don't think we need to pay a penny more than we actually are due to pay, because we are a member of the European Union until such time as we go out. What I would say also is that actually Theresa May's talked about the Great Repeal Act. What that will do is take everything that was European legislation and just slap it straight over and go, well, that's now the UK. I don't think that's good enough, because actually there are a number of things that are wrong with Europe that we really need to iron out, and that needs somebody to pick through the detail and say, no, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough. I've always said, you know, I was well advised by my constituents. I met with them very regularly. I met you, lots of you, I recognise faces. You came into the surgeries. You are the experts on the things that actually affect you, and I have had numerous meetings with people who've explained exactly which piece of legislation and what detail it is that needs to be sorted out to make their business work or their life better. And I think that's exactly what we need to do. We cannot just accept the removal of all of that 42 years worth of legislation and just say, right, okay, that's all right now because it's UK legislation. It's the detail we need to go through. So I think there are a number of issues also. I would just point out that I did the figures. Many of you will know that I've got a direct interest, particularly in farming, and because I was approaching a farming debate with Jacob Rees-Mogg and a number of other people in the run-up to Brexit, I actually worked out the figures. And in this constituency, there were payments made to farmers, when I totted them all up, of £17.829 million. That's just farming alone, and that was farm subsidy. And the amount of money that all of us paid every year was 16 million. So that's nearly £2 million more coming in just for farming alone. And you'll know that there's money coming in through tourism and other schemes that actually support the West Country in particular, because we're an area where we don't have much employment. We don't have many choices of the jobs that we do and where the income's coming from. It's all very well the government saying that we're going to do a lot better from business rates, but we don't have very many businesses that are actually, most of our businesses are small. And hopefully most of those will come outside of business rates. So we're going to be really quite challenged for our finances. So what I would say is when the farmers get that money, what they do is they spend it in the post office, they spend it in the village shop, they spend it in the local garage, they spend it down in the farriers, they spend it right the way through the system. Very, very few of them. I know Andy will tell me there is one particular landowner who owns thousands of acres on top of the Vendives. That is the exception. Most farmers use that money to live and they pour it straight into the local economy. They spend it in our shops, they spend it in our post offices. And that money, if we take that out, we need to make absolutely certain that in some way it's replaced. And I do not trust the Conservative government to actually make sure that we carry on with a level of support for an industry that's terribly important in this area. So I think we need to have somebody who can ask the questions and hold the government to account.
James.
So thank you. I think the Liberals are dancing on the head of a pin a bit here over Europe. Tim Farron was apparently sort of the great hope for reversing the referendum result, and then went on TV to say he was a bit Eurosceptic. Tessa says she sort of accepted the result, but we're going to leave, but in 2004 wrote a letter to the Welsh Journal saying that an EU constitution would help. The Lib Dem's central policy is a second referendum that is all about basically trying to unstitch the
rest. A referendum. It's
a referendum that asks the British public whether or not they want to accept the result of the negotiations, the New Deal, or to remain within the EU. Those are the two choices that are being prepared.
What's wrong with that?
Now, why is that such a bad policy? Because it effectively gives the EU leverage. What is the incentive for the EU to negotiate a good deal with the UK when what is in their interests is to give the worst deal possible, so that when you get to the date of that second referendum, the British public are choosing between the worst deal the EU could concoct for us or undoing Brexit altogether. It is a ridiculous idea that creates uncertainty for our economy and further divides our society. And as for the things that were said about the carrying forward of legislation, we've been clear that all existing EU legislation gets carried forward into not just the headlines, the detail too. And thereafter it gets amended in the interests of the United Kingdom. We've spoken about farming. Farmers in this constituency know that for every £3 of EU subsidy that they get back, actually, because we are a massive net contributor to the CAP, £1 of British taxpayers' money is subsidising their competitors in the EU. Now, there are three questions asked. Should the UK pay money to leave the EU? I say no as the default, but if there is clearly something that is worth paying for because it's a really great deal, then that is obviously in the gift of the government of the day. But as a point of principle, no, there should not be a bill for leaving the EU. What do we do about undoing all this institutional integration? I think the quote in the question was to make sure we don't destroy our economy and culture. I don't accept the premise of the question. I don't believe that our culture is dependent on our membership of the EU. The UK has a fine, rich culture that will endure Brexit without any problem whatsoever. And as for our economy, I believed the stuff that George Osborne and others were saying last year. I voted to remain because I thought that the economic consequence would be dire. I was wrong. The British economy has grown every quarter since. Employment is at a record high. Employment in this country right now is at a record high. It is true.
And the pound is almost the same as the euro today.
Inflation is about to rise.
Well, actually, I don't agree on that either. I think a lot of what we're seeing with the price increase at the moment is because we come to the end of the hedged period, when there was a sort of a year or so after the referendum where people had hedged previously, and we've come to an end of that. But the fact is that I am 100% confident that the UK economy can succeed very well outside of the EU. What do we do to make sure that social care and our NHS continues to flourish? Well, clearly, we make sure that our economy remains strong, that we have